endorse any kind of peaceful suffering. In fact, we don't endorse anything that's advocated by Martin Luther King that has a tendency to strip and disarm our people in this country at a time when the segregationists in the South are not disarmed. And we think that it is wrong to teach black people in America to be nonviolent at a time when someone is not teaching the white man in America also to be nonviolent.
No, I never said I said I have a dream speech was an impromptu speech. That was his dream. Mm-hmm. His dream ruined black people.
His dream, I'm sorry.
Not the speech. It was his dream to hold hand with white people. That was his dream because his grandmother told him he couldn't play with the white friend that he had. The black people before him didn't have a dream about holding hands and laying with white people, and they was way more vibrant. Their families was way more intact before this little boy, Martin Luther King, came along and convinced the youth that this is a better way. To go get hit upside the head just to eat at white folks' lunch counter. What's wrong with y'all, man? Ain't nothing worth that. Being spit on. Just to go sit at theirs? Only to lose ours?
I was just going to ask, do you think that kind of hurt like the black economic?
Dr. King said it himself, huh? Right before his passing. Mm-hmm. He told Harry Belafonte, I think I've led my people into a burning building. See, what happened was, if you studied the civil rights movement, initially, in the beginning, the forefront of the movement was equal rights and equal protection under the law. Meaning we got all these black businesses. Y'all can't come over here and burn us down. We can't burn y'all down. We can create our own court system, and y'all honor our court system just like Atlanta got a city with all black judges and all. So that's what the equal protection and equal rights was. The bullshit came in with integration. Who give a fuck about Jim Crow signs saying no colors allowed? Okay, I don't want to eat over there no way. I don't eat white folks cooking. I ain't met a white that cook to my taste bud. Every white restaurant I go to, I complain. Man, I bring my own seasoning. So I don't want to eat at white people's restaurant. I just want to white and the white during slavery.
The Reverend Martin Luther King preaches a doctrine of nonviolent insistence upon the rights of the American Negro. What is your attitude toward this philosophy?
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they've taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy or pray for those who use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attacks of the Klan in that day.
You don't understand my words, but you must choose.
Martin Luther King Jr., Savior or Sellout? By the title, you might be thinking that I'm speaking heresy against the civil rights leaders or the civil rights movement. That's not the case at all. We're going to examine the actions of Martin Luther King Jr. in comparison to the issues relevant to the civil rights movement. We're also going to examine organizations he was affiliated with. I know a handful of Freemasons. One of them is an ex-Mason. One of them confirmed that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were both Masons. They both were killed because they weren't following the order, just as John F. Kennedy was. But let's not jump too far yet. Let Steve Coakley tell it.
Yes, if you were to look to today, where Boule members like Vernon Jordan, who is managing director of Goldman Sachs, he took Bill Clinton to his first Bilderberger meeting in 1971. The black man took the white man from Arkansas to the big international meeting. Vernon Jordan, former head of the Urban League, who groomed Ron Brown, who then went on to become Secretary of Commerce, killed in a plane crash, murdered, because Boule are considered domestic. Martin King was Boule. Look at the relationship between Martin and Kwame over going against the war. You don't hear anybody in the African-centered community primarily against the war. They're basically accepting it or looking for what they try to get when whites are passing out things like, a grant here, this or that. They don't appear to be focused on that money that's being wasted, those billions of dollars.
You see, African and Afrocentric community
Africans
support the war?
They are not, no, I'm just saying, they are not pushing against the war.
Yeah.
Same way Martin King,
I understand what you're saying.
when April 4th of 67,
you're right.
1 year before he was killed to the day, when he came out of Riverside Church with Kwame in a shirt and tie in the front row, waiting to hear, because he called and said, you got to hear this. He comes out against the war. Boule men are told to be domestic, not international. Mickey Leland was Sigma Pi Phi. He tried to stop a starvation going on in Ethiopia, Somalia. His plane crashes into the mountain. Congressman from Texas, he dies. Ron Brown, again, Martin King, no question, Martin King became international, and that became his biggest sin. He was financed by some of the greatest foundations America ever had to offer. But if they get beyond the defined limit, then there's trouble.
We should understand that the so-called white people hated the so-called black people, to say the least, or as I like to call them, the melanists. Since this was the case, why do you think Martin Luther King Jr. was such a fervent activist for integration? Is it because he thought we should all just get along? Or is it because he felt a need to be validated by our oppressors? Or maybe it's because the masters pulling the strings told Martin, the puppet, to do this. And why was he such a strong activist for turning the other cheek? Was it to keep our people docile and at bay? Was that the purpose? If all the melanist people in this country came together on one front, ready to fight, that would have been a messy scene. So what did the puppet masters do? They told one of the most influential characters at that time to preach. If a man stabs you in the face with a knife, give him a loaded gun and let him blow your head smooth off. That's what that doctrine was doing. It was making people go from having a knife in their face to having a bullet in their head. They were giving up their power by being docile. Brother Malcolm wasn't having that. Why was he such a big activist for equal rights? To those that hated us, why not fight for the rights for us to have our own laws, our own cities, our own police, and our own schools? Why the need to be validated by a system that has never respected us? To work for them in the corporate world, there are rules against wearing braids and afros on some cases. You have to wear their clothes, speak like them, wear your hair like them. You have to depend on them for jobs, period. There are a few so-called black-owned businesses. He fought for integration of schools. But how progressive was that fight, really? Since we're integrated, we're forced to learn their science, i.e., we share common ancestors with apes, and all life spawned from rocks that were rained on for some odd billion years, that turned into primordial soup some odd billion years ago. And Columbus discovered America, although Christopher Columbus never even touched down on America. And how could he have discovered it when the Gadites, which are the Native Americans, already occupied the land? Was his fight for integration? Was his fight for us to be integrated in their schools, get their degrees, then get out just to use those degrees as credentials to get their jobs? That's all a degree boils down to, credentials. It says which one of their schools you graduated from, then get out just to use those degrees as credentials to get their jobs. It wasn't that Mr. King was a great speaker or a radical revolutionary that made him so great. It was because he was publicized. Many men could have been Martin Luther King. Many men were Martin Luther King. But many men did not have his connections. He was also famous because he was martyred for the cause. He was killed to put the nail in the coffin of the civil rights movement. He was told to fight for integration rather than liberation. I'm not trying to take away from what he did, but there was a better cause to fight for. Martin Luther King wasn't a great man. He was just a man that was greatly publicized, a Mason that made our people docile. I'm not trying to be a heretic, just provoke thought. Shalom.
What you talking about? It's what you need to know. One of your most memorable times with Martin Luther King Jr.?
The civil rights movement had a lot of leaders, and Martin was just probably number one leader. And his philosophy was passive resistance. And I am totally against passive resistance or nonviolence. Nonviolence is something that's applicable to all human beings. You know, all of us should not be violent. But that's not a movement. A movement is proactive. And so I admired his courage and his sincerity, but I didn't think that nonviolence was a solution to the problem of inequality in America. I thought that nonviolence meant that you'd march and sing, and you would try to appeal to the consciousness of the same people that were discriminating against you. So my concept was, how can you get to the consciousness of a person that has no consciousness and who is relegating you to a second-class citizenship because of your color? So I thought economic development and a sense of cultural power would be a better way to fight, because capitalism in America was riding high, and you need resources. And as I looked at the Jewish community, they applied it fantastically. And as I looked around at the community, the Korean communities, they seemed to be applying it. And it seemed that people that took care of themselves and dealt with economic development and had high family values and didn't try to integrate would do a better job of integrating. But integration can't be your goal. And I give an example. If I want to live in a white neighborhood and they jack the prices up, but I want to integrate it for the sake of integrating it, I pay twice as much for the house. That's like paying twice as much to live with white folks. I never thought that was very valuable. My rights under the Constitution. And I would always say to Martin's people, you know, I'm of African descent. I'm an American citizen. I pay my damn taxes, and I want my rights. Underline that, and you can't challenge it. Okay? I'm a citizen, you're a citizen, you pay your taxes, I pay my taxes, you get your rights, I get my rights.
Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Who don't know, King was a husband and father of four to Coretta Scott King. Hoover's pursuit would increase after King called the FBI completely ineffectual in resolving the continued mayhem and brutality inflicted upon the Negro in the Deep South. Through the FBI's domestic counterintelligence program, King was the victim of FBI surveillance that showed alleged evidence of extramarital affairs. His hope was to then pass it on to the press, and that the press would publish it, and it would really discredit Dr. King and his reputation as this upright Christian minister who was leading the civil rights movement. So people would say, oh, how horrible his personal life is. How can we follow this man? Now, what they didn't bank on was, back in the 60s, the press did not take the bait. They did not reveal the personal lives of these public figures. They didn't do it with John F. Kennedy, they didn't do it with others, and they didn't do it with Dr. King. The FBI would do whatever they could in order to discredit King. These methods would include wiretapping his home and hotel rooms and paying informants to spy on him. According to the film MLK/FBI, they would go into these hotels before King and his associates got there, and they would be let in by the management to bug those rooms and to have the rooms next door, nearby, where they could listen in to what was going on when King's associates took those rooms. And as Chuck Knox says, a former FBI agent, anytime King was going to a new city, FBI agents were on the move to get to those places, to start to monitor and wiretap and listen to everything what was happening within the confines of those rooms between King and his associates, members of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The wiretappers revealed that King was having extramarital affairs. Some members of King's staff knew what was going on. Ralph David Abernathy, activist and friend to King, would also confirm that King had his share of women in his book, and the walls came tumbling down. According to Abernathy, King himself wasn't fazed by the possibility of this getting out either. Abernathy would even reveal that King had encounters with various women on the night before his April 4th, 1968 assassination in Memphis, Tennessee. All understood and believed in the biblical prohibition against sex outside marriage. It was just that he had a particularly difficult time with that temptation. He was a man who attracted women, even when he didn't intend to, and attracted them in droves. He was a hero, the greatest hero of his age, and women are always attracted to a hero. The main infraction I see that could be raised is from his wife, Coretta Scott King, at the time. Was it something she knew and was okay with as long as he didn't bring it home? According to her own words in the book, My Life, My Love, My Legacy, Coretta would address the speculations about King. The question everyone wants to know is this: do I believe my husband was faithful? Coretta would go on to say that MLK had a guilt complex that would cause him to admit wrongdoings, and she had a gut feeling that their marriage was sound, causing her to believe MLK was a faithful husband. If you study history, power and women go hand in hand. So there shouldn't be a surprise that Kentucky Senator Georgia Davis Powers, Dolores Evans, and civil rights activist Dorothy Cotton were some of the women linked to King. Some of the surveillance would even reveal a 12-person hotel orgy and a secret apartment where King was reported in spending time with Miss Cotton. When the FBI felt that they had enough evidence, they sent King an anonymous letter along with some of the tapes and suggested that he kill himself.
Cars already dropped her off at City Team, and the only thing I have is that a 50-year-old female. Okay, we'll be out. Okay.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Police have issued an all-points bulletin for a well-dressed young white man seen running from the scene. Officers also reportedly chased and fired on a radio-equipped car containing 2 white men. Dr. King was standing on the balcony of a second-floor hotel room tonight when, according to a companion, a shot was fired from across the street. In the friend's words, the bullet exploded in his face. Police, who have been keeping a close watch over the Nobel Peace Prize winner because of Memphis' turbulent racial situation, were on the scene almost immediately. They rushed the 39-year-old Negro leader to a hospital where he died of a bullet wound in the neck. Police said they found a high-powered hunting rifle about a block from the hotel, but it was not immediately identified as the murder weapon. Mayor Henry Loeb has reinstated the dusk-to-dawn curfew he imposed on the city last week when a march led by Dr. King erupted in violence. Governor Buford Ellington has called out 4,000 National Guardsmen, and police report that the murder has touched off sporadic acts of violence in a Negro section of the city. In a nationwide television address, President Johnson expressed the nation's shock.
America is shocked and saddened by the brutal slaying tonight of Dr. Martin Luther King. I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King, who lived by nonviolence.
Dr. King had returned to Memphis only yesterday, determined to prove that he could lead a peaceful mass march in support of striking sanitation workers, most of whom are Negroes. Dr. King had this to say last night about the situation in Memphis.
Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights.
There was shock in Harlem tonight when word of Dr. King's murder reached the nation's largest Negro community. Men, women, and children poured into the streets. They appeared dazed. Many were crying. A young Negro said Dr. King didn't really have to go back to Memphis. Maybe he wanted to prove something.
In one moment, just one moment, it all ended. That shot affected America. It affected Black America in such a way, I can't begin to express to people what happened. I know how I felt. I mean, the tears would not stop. And Martin was dead.